did Elon Musk bought the domain?
At x.ai, we built a personal assistant that can schedule meetings.
Let me tell you a story. I am very happy I am not, or did not, through some means get sucked into his universe, which seems to be full of chaos. If you sell something, you should accept the fact that you sold it. If you didn't want to sell it, you should keep it. I earned my card, and I'm certainly using it. If you imagine a lifelong career as an entrepreneur where you play multiple games, you're playing one game and that is it. You can shit all over the process, burn all your bridges, and go buy that boat and be okay with it.
What's the power dynamic in these relationships for you?
If you think about you assembling power, you probably already lost. The whole thing is so hard that even just trying to get half of a first customer is nearly impossible. So trying to figure out in what meeting I have what power on or what set of boat just doesn't matter.
Can you tell me about the team that you're building?
In my opinion, at least, anything which is being acquired for technology, the team tends to be super important. I surely have a set of engineers where I would work with them any day of the week, in any capacity, on any venture. Because in this day and age, anything is software in some way, shape, or form.
Set out to create this intelligent agent that can schedule meetings, not as an app, not a plugin, not an extension, but as an agent.
So you are either a seller or a maker. Side note, I'm a big fan of the word seller. As in, if you can't sell the first 10 customers yourself, nobody can.
I think that great companies are forged by strong partnerships, especially between people who started the business together. I'm gifted having great partners in my life. I have just a few, but I value them very much. My guest today had been successful in establishing partnerships with business partners, investors, and the teams, and he's done that successfully 5 times already. Today, I'm joined by Dennis Mortensen, the founder of LaunchBrightly, but you might know Dennis from his 2 previous startups, x.ai and Visual Revenue. Here's my conversation with Dennis, the one I'd like to call the professional founder. Thank you and enjoy the episode. So the first question to just kind of warm up, tell me why is that? Why you are not posting on LinkedIn anymore as regularly as you posted? You are disappointed with the platform, you don't have time, but I mean, last post like 2 weeks ago, before that, a month ago, you are not regularly checking in. Why is that?
Perhaps there's 2 types of people who arrive on any social media destination. And by the way, and as a side note, if I were to rank each one of the destinations that I'm exposed to, I think LinkedIn might just be number 1. It used to be what was called Twitter, because it was a place for where you could actually lean back, learn stuff from a host of people that you kind of followed,
right,
who had interesting things to say. No need to go down that particular avenue. We could spend 2 hours talking about what is going on there. That doesn't matter. But I actually do think LinkedIn, of all the places, is a good, valuable backdrop. Now, why do I not post on a regular basis? I think people who force themselves to post on a regular basis for the idea that I must do something to engage my audience could end up not being super authentic. Now, why did I do it in the past? Well, I had a story to tell. As in, I had a product I at least thought deserved some attention. Surely I'm biased. I love the product. I spent years in kind of crafting it together with my team. So there was a song to sing. Now, we kind of put the band back together, 5, 6 guys in the basement, hacking away, trying to make the most of it. Once that reached some sort of inflection point for where, this is interesting. I would like people to kind of know, see, feel, and perhaps get as excited as me. Then you'll kind of just see things change. But I don't need to post for the sake of posting. It's not like, Dennis has 10 followers and I need to maintain that. Nah, if I have a good story to tell, you'll see it. And as another side note, you should expect that velocity to change probably in the autumn once we hit that first version of our new product. So there's the reason.
The reason why I asked the question was I'm, I have a lot of people for this season that I do research for, and majority of them have 400, 500,000, 1 million followers like yourself, like a big followership. And what I notice is that the way that people build their thought leadership is they're very regular, expressing opinions and thoughts on the subject matters in their industry, like a top voice, right? And they do that consistently over the course of many years. Very often it's like a daily post or something like that. But what was interesting about your page was that your newsfeed was, as you just pointed out, exclusively product features, product update, integrations, company news, something like as if you were like so fascinated about the product that you're building that you kind of are just kind of like just peeling out everything that's happening just with that excitement. But then also you're putting that originality, right? And then you kind of stopped, and then you stopped at the time when obviously you exited the business, and now you're kind of building something new. And then as I kind of assume that you're cooking something, and then when it's cooked and you're just releasing, you'll continue kind of doing that, right? So the question I have for you, who was this kind of product announcement-led thought leadership? Who was this for? Have you seen this approach to be kind of successful? Did you see audience engaging with it? You've been addressing most of that for investors, early users, just kind of, speak to me about the kind of whole approach, because again, it's a bit unique in a way that all other thought leaders at your level of followers.
It's a good observation, right? For where some people, again, perhaps even most, feel a little uncomfortable in singing their own song and doing so repeatedly. For where what you just noticed is true and honest. Doesn't mean that everybody should like it or even agree with me, but that was the only song that I presented. My product, our story, our journey, not because I felt like I had to, because I genuinely thought it was interesting. And the primary audience was me. So I had something to say. If somebody else would look at that and say, that is interesting. And I hope people could see that, Dennis is not necessarily trying to sell me something, but he did engineer something that he thought was super cool and somehow wanted to tell the world about that. So I do think it's unique, and I think that's a good observation. And there's not as many, and I'm sure I could somehow, through some other tactic, change the velocity of new followers. Doesn't matter. But I could probably if I took a different tactic. But that's not the tactic I like. And again, I do it primarily because I think it's a good story to tell. And it doesn't really matter whether I tell it to you in a one-on-one on some Zoom call or to 500,000 people on LinkedIn. That's really the same to me. Now, does it work? It worked actually for almost all constituents, meaning that we were very good at using LinkedIn as exposure for our product. Doesn't mean that people picked our product. It just means that when it was time to pick a product, it felt like we should at least be in the pool. That's all I wanted. I wanted you to at least just say, hey, that might be worthy of a look. I might end up picking a competitor, fine, but at least make sure that you have a look at what we've crafted. That worked very well. It also worked very well for kind of a bucket of, you can call it investors, but really multiple kind of types of entities in that, folks that could end up being interesting for an M&A chat, for some sort of code dev, for straight kind of investment today, tomorrow, in the future, some different kind of stage. It worked very well for our candidate funnel. Just as a side note, for the last candidate, which we just hired 2 days ago in this new venture, but worked in the past as well, I think we had 500 engineers at the top. We can talk about each one of the steps in our hiring funnel, but it worked very well for that. And then perhaps, and we can talk about many more. I'll give you one more example. It worked, and that seems almost silly when I say it out loud, as a good internal communication tool. And you might immediately say, but Dennis, that's called the general channel on Slack. Why would you post that on LinkedIn? Nah, you know what? If you have just a little bit of pride of what you're working on, it's nice to see it being exposed, not just working on it in the dark alone. So having those particular features for that set of engineers that worked on some new type of prediction or new type of UI or new type of kind of extraction or what have you. Hey, seeing that in public and being applauded was kind of nice. It's kind of like a different version, I think more authentic version of the kind of employee of the month that you'll see in some restaurant, in some place you go to tonight, where this was just one where, well, Joe did work on, say, in our last venture, a concept of max meetings. I could talk about that for hours on end, what that exactly translates into. And Joe is certainly an expert on it, but doesn't have the audience to kind of sing that song. I do, and I'll happily kind of sing that song. And that gives him some pride, gives us all some pride. So that worked well as well. So sticking to it, you'll see me do the exact same thing for LaunchBrightly. Close your eyes, 4 or 5 months, you'll be thinking about, I should really unfollow Dennis. Like, that's kind of where we'll be at. But give me some more months.
Talk to me about the historical prejudice that you had in the past. Are you doing the same all the time? So, okay, for x.ai or
x.ai.
Did Elon bought the domain?
I am very happy I am not, or did not, through some means get sucked into his universe, which seems to be full of chaos. So I'm very happy that it's at arm's length. Sure, you always want your own brand to somehow survive, but the acquirer of x.ai wants the technology and not the brand. Like any startup or any kind of company which is not Coca-Cola or Nike probably don't want to adopt really other brands. They can barely make their own brand, right? So stick to what you have, adopt the technology, and ended up not using that. And that's okay. And then, of course, Elon Musk acquired the domain name a few months back.
I just, I've mentioned to my colleague before the interview that I'm going to have this sitting with you, and it's like the domain is x.ai, and then like with one letter, I say, yeah, one letter. And it's like, but that's the Elon's Twitter kind of, it's like, oh, really? And it's just like, I did the hours of the research and I didn't connect the dots that the domain was bought out, just probably because I'm ignoring everything that is with Twitter right now, you know.
If you look up all the trademarks, you'll still see my my address on them. I'm sure they'll change that as they kind of move forward.
Interesting how the names works. My company name is Belkins, and there is this huge hardware manufacturer, Belkin. We trademarked Belkins' name as well for the marketing and advertising as a services, and with us, and they allowed it, so it's kind of cool. But usually what's happening is that there's later down the road there might be some problems with that, right? If you start being big enough. I wanted to move on to something that you always speak about, and you just even right now pointed out about having connections and building relationships with kind of investors, with teams, with people. And you spoke a lot about the role of partners and strategic partners and relationships in your life and in your businesses, and that you very often even, if you don't see the immediate opportunity, you still get a conversation going, right? Because that's something that can grow and you can build in the future, right? So I wanted to start off with something more basic and then kind of develop the thought into more complex questions. So do you have co-founders? Usually you start company with someone else, or you're the solopreneur?
In the 5 prior ventures that I've done over the last short of 27 years, I've always had co-founders in some capacity. This time around, I also have a co-founder. We can talk about all of the things you should avoid when you take in somebody which is not you or your spouse and try to make it work. Long kind of story on that. But I do find it of immense value. Even, this is obviously a dramatic version of it, even if your co-founder didn't do much, the fact that you have one will make you do more. So me persuading my current co-founder to resign his short of 300K job, come work on this for next to nothing for years on end, with the ultimate outcome probably being that we won't make it, which is the default outcome of any startup. That puts some pressure on you to be at your best, which is that it was me who asked. It was me who took him from something very comfortable to something very uncomfortable. Dennis, you can't get up at 11 and doing a little bit of work. You have to get up early. You have to kind of open that kind of Red Bull immediately and you need to kind of get cranking. I know it doesn't end on Friday. So even just the fact that you are now somewhat married to one or more individuals will kind of have you change gears. That's certainly how I've always had it, which is that I cannot let these people down. Once you're alone on something, I'm not saying you would let yourself down, but it's easier to cut things a little short or dial the momentum or velocity down ever so slightly. And it won't even be visible. There's 15 other reasons. But this alone, I think, makes it a worthwhile endeavor trying to find some partner. Now, it is super dangerous, which is that you can very quickly end up making that's the reason that you die, which is you die because of 1,000 things, but a few of them are very high on the list. And co-founders not being able to figure it out together is certainly in that top 5 for where the idea, the market, the product might even have some kind of brilliant kind of engineers behind you as well, but you couldn't figure it out with Tim, and then the whole thing kind of just implode.
Now you're being modest right now, saying that, hey, Dennis, you invite someone to work on this company and you don't know whether it's going to succeed or fail. Well, with your experience right now, I must say that people more eager to join being co-founder with you, right? Because first off, years of experience. Second off, you're probably not going to start a venture that you're not potentially going to fail. There is a very high probability that when you start a company after you're 40 and then you have 20 years of experience, it's going to succeed than when you were 20, right? Everything considered, right? So I think that co-founders are actually happy that you invited them to start on working on that company. Or tell me that I'm wrong.
2 points to that. I don't think you are wrong, but 2 points to that. One, I think you can look at entrepreneurship in many ways, but I think some people might just put it in 2 buckets. There's the one bucket for where it is something which you stumble into. There's an idea that you cannot not do. You must go about doing it. And then you do your 3, 4, or 5 years. It might or might not work out. Default again is that it won't work out. It's supposed not to work out. If they all worked out, it wouldn't really be entrepreneurship. So it's supposed to be very dangerous. And along the way, you die, right? But it was a moment in time. Then there's the other kind of school of thought, which I prescribe to, which is that entrepreneurship might also just be a career choice. Like any other career choice, it is not something which you do once. It's not like I was an architect for 3 or 4 years and now I'm doing something else. That is probably a lifelong career. And you're going to try to perfect your skills and your craft over the years. And you would like to believe that your 22-year version of yourself and your late 40s version of yourself, well, one of those 2 are better than the other. And I'm now on my 6th venture, having spent about 5 years on each. And I would like to believe that I'm a little bit better today than I was yesterday. Simply because you make some mistakes, you take some notes, you figure out some good processes, you carry them over the last venture to the new venture. So that certainly should increase the quality of the entrepreneur over time. That's the one part for where that alone, I'm a big fan of. Try to imagine, at least early on, whether this is a career choice. Not as in, I'm going on vacation. It just happens to be a vacation where I work hard for 4 years, but it's a one-off thing and I'll kind of cross it off my bucket list. Sure, and you can do that. And I certainly encourage people to try it because I hope they'll fall in love and turn it into a career. But it could be that career. That's the one part. The other part you mentioned, which is that anybody teaming up with somebody who's been around the block just a few times, perhaps even had a few kind of successful exits, should be delightful to do so. We're probably all trying to kind of find some sort of equilibrium for where the new venture can't be so safe that it's not a venture at all. As in, I decide to do 10 hours of some type of consulting a week. I'm sure I could sell 10 hours, do that on the side, and there's absolutely no risk. Sure, some hours are sold for 300, some are sold for 900, but the whole thing is really a no-risk venture. I'll make a few monies as a consultant. Then there's the kind of extreme where 6 months to fly to Mars, that seems like a long time. Let me build a rocket that could do it in 3 weeks. Okay, that seems like a lot of research and very dangerous. And I'm not sure you're going to make kind of any dent on that particular endeavor. So that just swings all the way to the other side. So you should try to find some sort of equilibrium for where it is realistic but dangerous. Because if you do that, and here's perhaps another way to describe it, instead of some sort of made up equilibrium, but it's supposed to be this kind of equilibrium between, you can imagine it. You, the founding team, the market can barely imagine it yet. So you kind of swing in between that, which is how you make sure you make some return on your effort. Another way to kind of describe this is the story of what you want to bring to market and the difficulty in executing the particular kind of idea you have. You need some delta between those two, meaning that if there's no delta, then the idea and implementation is so simple that any 3 guys in a basement in Queens can pick it up next weekend, or any kind of small YC team over the summer can put something to market, meaning that it's surely kind of interesting, but it's really a hack. Someone will win it. It might even be a big market, but it's probably more lottery like who stumbles into the right setting. You want to separate those two. Sometimes they go too far apart, like the self-driving car. My mom understands the concept, but the difficulty in executing it, the delta seems very dramatic. Perhaps there's another version of that. So you try to find these kind of deltas where far apart, but not too far. And that's where some of the danger lies. So you can never really, see exactly how far they're apart, because you're an entrepreneur, you're optimistic. I can almost see it from here. And then, of course, you work for years and then, shit, that was much smarter than
That's
imagined.
true. Yeah. I mean, I think my point was more about that. If Dennis worked in the industry and he knows the space and his new startup is within the same ballpark of where it is, that the chances that it's going to succeed much higher. Obviously, if you're going to go ahead and you build a rocket to Mars, I would although you had 10 successful exits and you're really like super entrepreneur guy, I would think twice before joining you in, because that's totally different game, right? That they were playing here.
So what you're saying here is also true, which is what you describe, I describe as some sort of magical entrepreneurial card that you have in your wallet. So if you're one of the few entrepreneurs who's been lucky enough or fortunate enough to stumble into a beginning and end journey, which is that you actually got started on something and you got to an exit. Put a few monies in your pocket, perhaps even put a few monies in some investors' pocket, you get this invisible magical card you can put in your wallet. If you have multiple of those cards that I'm fortunate to have, well, even better. So that if you want to do anything that rhymes with startup, at any moment in time, I can pull out my card. That makes it easier, surely. And I don't think it's unfair or boasting. It's just a fact of life that I did my 26 years. You can go do your 26 years. Once you've done those and you get a few cards, go play them. That means it's certainly easier for me to call investors, find kind of co-founders, hire engineers, call on customers, sing a song on LinkedIn, have an audience. Like, hey, I earned my card and I'm certainly using it. So I'm not hiding it. I am using it aggressively so that, if you're a little bit in doubt on whether you should join Stripe or us, let me tell you a story. And I hope my story is so exciting that you ditched that job over at Stripe.
It's so interesting. And you raised a great point about having the card. I agree with your point, but I also think that a card is sort of like a metaphor for a brand or like an asset, digital asset, like a presence that you have, right? Even like a LinkedIn page is an asset that you have. But what's interesting is very often we as founders are building those assets because we either have the story to tell or we have a certain agenda in mind. We need to talk to investors, to the team, etc. What kind of, I wouldn't say disappoints me, but something that just sounds straight for me is that, and I always tell to my guys that, hey, utilize company brand and the resources to build your own brand and your own platforms, right? You have so much content that is out there. You have so many opportunities that you can get into. And so to start building that sort of like card or writing that card. You don't necessarily need to have, I know so many people that have a similar card, but they might do like a podcast, a webinar show, a blog, a newsletter, you name it, right? They just being curious and start kind of connecting and doing effort in that regard. You can kind of don't have the exact ticket as you said, but you might have I don't know, like drawing of a ticket or something, right? That would kind of have a shape and the form that you need, but you need to put an effort. And you can do that not necessarily as a co-founder. We've seen so many VP of sales, director of sales, head of sales, customer success manager that are very active, right? That have the same reputation and the same brand to be able to kind of also, put together that.
I agree. There are multiple cards in this deck. It's just that the particular card I describe, if we want to continue on this analogy, is the Queen of Hearts. And you can build up an interesting audience on Twitter or have a kind of very interesting kind of podcast.
Yeah.
And you might get 7 of diamonds. And hey, 7 of diamonds, it's not a bad card. You should play it because you have it. Because some people have no cards. I haven't been dealt any cards just yet. And so try to assemble that. This particular card is just a strong one and allows you to play a more aggressive game if you have the Queen of Hearts.
You mentioned this already, but I just want to reconfirm. What's your thoughts on kind of starting companies with the same partners or moving on and look for the new ones? What's your experience? You have a long life partners. You're starting with the new ones, pros and cons, etc.
Each one of the ventures that I've done, I've always carried over known entities from the past. Coming back to what we talked about just before, which is that finding a co-founder is an extremely dangerous endeavor. So you need to de-risk it somehow. You can de-risk it in many ways. One of the better ways to de-risk it is, say, Joss, which is my co-founder for LaunchBrightly. We worked together for over 5 years at x.ai. So we certainly know how to work together. We have expectations of what the other individual will kind of do, lean in, apply for this particular venture. So that's a known entity. We know our particular kind of skill sets and figure out in this Venn diagram, how do we complement each other? What is it that we're supposed to do? I said, well, it's probably going to look like what we did in the past. You do you, I do me, and I like me, and I like you. So let's just do that. Sure, new responsibilities will arrive. We'll figure out whether they land in kind of your role or mine, but it's almost given because we spent 5 years rehearsing. So the idea of at least de-risking a big unknown, if you can, is well worth it. You can find other kind of dimensions you want to de-risk on, but that's certainly been it for me. Taking people from the past, that's, and here's another kind of element to it, just as a side note. I've liked to pick people who were not yet my co-founders in the past. I did that once or twice though, where we were co-founders together before, but I like people who were kind of early employees and hit that kind of ceiling of, well, I could have been a co-founder, but somehow I landed 11 months later, but I still have the urge. So if someday you're booting up a new venture, then give me a ring so that it becomes their first time around.
What's the power dynamic in these relationships for you? You're equals, or as they said, you're primus inter pares, Julius Caesar.
I'm not a fan of equals, and there's enough blog posts and podcasts and commentary out there that would agree with that fact. For if you are equals, you might later be confused about some particular fork in the road. If we can't do nothing, we must do something. I suggest left, somebody else suggests right. We probably don't even know which one is the better one. We have opinions, no data yet. You need somebody who can say, we go left. And it is what it is. So I've always liked the idea that I would be the kind of majority founder. And that requires something that I arrive early on. Perhaps I arrive with the idea. Perhaps I arrive with, I always arrive with a little bit of capital just to kind of get the whole thing kind of started. And that sets the tone. Well, yes, Dennis kind of pulled out his wallet. The whole thing kind of seems fair. And we're here today because he pulled out his wallet. Yes, we raised a little bit of capital, but we still had to pay for those first 5 months. And so he did.
So, well, that's the cap table. So you were saying that the power dynamic is the same. So you're the majority founder, the CEO, the boss, and then sort of like they kind of consult with you, but then you always make the final. So they kind of consult, hey, Dennis, what can we do with this or that, right?
That's a good observation. I think my point is it is rare you see a cap table and power dynamics has a slightly negative connotation attached to it, but nevertheless reversed. That you have somebody for where they have a larger chunk on the cap table, but have very little power in the venture itself. And by the way, power is not a good word here because it rhymes with some of the kind of political friction at larger companies. Where in a startup, if you think about you assembling power, you probably already lost. The whole thing is so hard that even just trying to get half of a first customer is nearly impossible. So trying to figure out in what meeting I have what power or what set of votes just doesn't matter. Of course, getting a little bit of success, the arrangements we made in the beginning are now cemented and you can not really change them, especially if you got in external investors. You can't move things around or it becomes very difficult. So sure, you can just create a setting in the beginning that you would like to be fair, honest, and reasonable in the future as well. But there are no kind of power dynamics as you kind of set out to see.
Can you tell me about the team that you're building? So, having, as you said, like exited startups, a lot of prominent startups in the past, and now building a new one, you must have kept like kind of A players close to you, right? People that are like there, that can, get the job done for you, right? So, what's your approach into kind of building relationships with these people? And then do you move some of them to a new startup? Do they always say, hey, Dennis, we kind of wanted to talk with you? And again, it obviously depends on why you sold the company. As you mentioned out, like x.ai was sold because of the technology, right? So maybe the team wasn't as important for them to have around, right? But you got the point, right? What's your thoughts on sort of like building the A team and then moving that team to other startups, kind of keeping those relationships ignited, et cetera, et cetera?
Just a quick correction, in my opinion at least, anything which is being acquired for technology, the team tends to be super important. So software on its own is surely kind of valuable and interesting, but you need the engineers and maintainers to put that software in place to stay put. Actually, so much so that you actually put aside a large amount of money to make sure they don't kind of disappear after the exit, like 7 figures, where you put these monies out to these people so that if they still input for kind of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, they get bonuses. So that seems to be super important. Just a note for people who are listening. Now, another kind of side note, I do believe that if you sell something, you should be honest about what you're selling and not try to deceive people into a setting for where you want a few monies in your pocket. Once that's done, your first set of calls are going to be to the 7 best guys and girls. That seems not right, not kosher. And if you do that once, you're really adding a discount to any future activity you're going to do, which is that they're going to be a reference call back to the prior acquirer. So can we trust these individuals?
Right.
Well, no. Well, so the $20 we wanted to pay you for that company, I need to add a discount because my assumption is you're going to rob the team. If not the day after, then shortly thereafter. So I can't pay full price. So you're really shooting yourself in the foot. So you should try, at least to the best of your ability, to encourage people to stay put. That is actually part of what they acquired. Now, if you think there's 1 or 2 people for where there's a future of us together, you should even try to assemble that in the agreement for where, hey, we are probably so entrepreneurial that we will eventually disappear. I've been very clear, not to be rude, but in any one of the exits that we've done, which is that I have no corporate career ambitions. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If you want to be SVP of whatever at some company, I think that is admirable for you, not for me though. So what you should try to get out of me is a really good integration. As in, you paid me $10 for this. It should feel like $12 once I leave. Like, you know what? It was worth more than we paid for it. That's a good integration. If you feel the whole thing was a little bit of a fluke, didn't really work, it's a write-off,
Right.
doesn't serve me at all. So I'm very eager to do a very good integration and see people succeed on the other side. That doesn't mean that I don't have favorite people that I would like to call. And I do call on people years down the line and saying, hey, either they just moved on their own or doing different things. Yes, I have a kind of pool of people I like to call on. Sometimes we can't really get into work this time. Then we'll just do multiple hour-long walks around Manhattan where I can extract some knowledge from you, because I love what you have to offer. But you're right. Try to be a decent human being and understand the game you're playing.
Even for me right now, because I'm still kind of the first time founder and, building the team, we have like 300 people and multiple SaaS products under one umbrella, etc. And what I'm focusing right now into is to build those relationships into having the best marketing team, having the best product team, having the best client team. And all of the people that I'm working with, that I'm growing this relationship with, I wouldn't say that they're per se personal, but I have this strong professional bonding with them. They know me from without like even setting a Jira task. You can just say, hey, it's already done, right? So I was hoping that I would want to build this relationship to the level that I can solve more complex problem down the road when I kind of exit this business, etc. So, and you probably have or had those people like, the best marketing, the best engineer, the best UI UX design, someone that it's hard to find, right? Someone like, find a very good product lead designer, find it. It's impossible, right? But the point is this, you mentioned that you kind of keep those relationships kind of sometimes, but then do you kind of let them go and they said, hey, you're with this company, with this startup, I will find someone else. Do you kind of still eager to kind of strengthen our relationship and you kind of pull them all together with you? And then the question is maybe for you as a tech founder, what are the relationships that you going back to every time, that you still kind of stretching with you over the 2, 3, 4 companies that you're building, that you're going back to, maybe as a recommendation for folks listening to this, hey, keep those guys close to you because it's hard to kind of...
I'll come back to my previous testimony, which is that if you sell something, you should accept the fact that you sold it. If you didn't want to sell it, you should keep it. Now that you sold it, a very large part, especially if it's software, are the people. Now, it is on me to be strong enough to not call on that half dozen really good people. Because if I do so, sure, I win today, but as I come back to, you lose in the future. Because what you just done puts a discount on your back. You're now walking around Manhattan or wherever you live, and people will look at you and say, well, what you have is worth $40, but I can't pay $40 for it because I know what you might just do on the other side. I don't want to walk around with a discount. I would love to work with these people. Now, life happens, which is that, say, Joss ended up working in a different place, post acquisition, stayed there for a year. That company I have no relationship with. I said, he's just a good employee at a company where they would love to kind of keep him around for a long time. He has entrepreneurial ambitions, and me teaming up with him in that setting, that's all good and fine. But extracting people from the acquired, I'm not a fan of. I'm a fan of the people, and I would love to do it, but I'm not a fan of the practice. I don't think that is the right thing to do.
Yeah. I think that I'm just kind of still kind of romanticizing the whole kind of relationship, right? I think that you as the professional founder, as you said, as the profession, you understand that there's certain like cycle to a product, and that cycle finishes at the when you exited. So the product still should be successful without you being a part of that. And then people being part of the sort of the whole, structure would kind of make sense, letting go and kind of building and moving on with something else and being very, strict about that.
I've only talked about the discount. The discount comes when you are doing things which, in my opinion, one shouldn't do. There's also a premium, which is that you sold something for $50, but you do the integration so well, you get your team so excited to kind of stay put. You help sell the combined vision that the rumor around town, investors, M&A teams, and others, that was really an $80 acquisition. That means there's now a premium on whatever you build next, which is that, you know what? It looks like 50, but what Michael is building is just solid. He's just building good stuff, good teams, excited teams that are eager to become that multiplier. That is always the case. So if you get acquired, it's typically by some entity much bigger than yours. What you have is really teeny weeny. Well, you immediately build a teeny weeny, but they look at it and say, you know what? If we put it inside this, it could become a multiplier. I could take my sales force, my market, my brand, my what have you, and I can dial it up. So you want that premium, because then all of a sudden, well, the next thing you'll say, yeah, it looks small, but hey, take a look at what we've done in the past. Think bigger. Will be that multiplier. So I'd much rather do all that effort, even though that it looks to go against what I would want, because it becomes a multiplier in the future. But obviously, only matters if you imagine a lifelong career as an entrepreneur where you play multiple games. If you're playing one game and that is it, you can shit all over the process, burn all your bridges, and go buy that boat and be okay with it.
Going back to that second part of the question, and again, let's just hypothetically, right? So if you were to, as you said, like put in the agreement a role that you would want to keep close to you for your next project, right? Like someone that is like, okay, this is a strong IP that is one of the hardest to build intact, and I'm kind of keeping that person or role with me for my next startup, and I'm putting that in agreement that everyone's thumbs up. Who would that be? Chief Technology Officer, Chief Product Officer, CFO, UI, sales. You have like, if you were to pick one, let's say hypothetically, who would that be?
That's a very, very good question. And it obviously all depends on the type of next thing. But if we don't have the outline of the next thing and we just bring in good people, good person for where whatever happens, I would like to kind of work with them. I surely have a set of engineers where I would work with them any day of the week, in any capacity, on any venture, whatever it might look like. Because in this day and age, anything is software in some way, shape, or form. And if I could, they could just walk in the door now, say, hey, where's my seat? Over there. You are immediately hired. So I think it will fall back on the maker side. Now, that's the one part. Then if I go back to something for where I believe, side note, I'm full of side notes. So any kind of small-ish or kind of seed A, B type company, you should really only have two roles. You have sellers, you have makers. Sure, we all have kind of fancier titles, but those are the two buckets. If you don't know which bucket you're in, you are a supporting cast and you probably don't belong here. So you are either a seller or a maker, as in what did you push to production in these last N number of days? Or which customer did you speak to in these last N number of days? Side note, I'm a big fan of the word seller. I actually like the word sales because for most people, it feels a little dirty and uncomfortable. They want to be all sorts of other kind of more exotic things like
marketing.
There's nothing wrong with marketing, but I like them to know you're in the seller bucket. Like we don't do anything here unless we're trying to sell something. So just be okay with you being a seller. But they want to be all sorts of other things, right? You've certainly seen that. But I like people who embrace the fact that, well, we got some good product. It's our job to sell it. Yes, I might just have some particular unique role in marketing, but I'm a seller. Be happy about it. Tell your friends that that's the bucket that you're in. Many won't. I do have a few people. Actually, just had dinner with one, this is Monday, like Saturday night, for one of my previous ventures, a VP of sales. That, again, just, there's not many of them. Because, another side note to sales. Of all the other roles you hire for, many of them are testable. As in, you can test for, to some degree, good engineering. As in, you can at least make sure you don't have a set of Muppets beginning next week. The same for kind of UI, UX, certain types of kind of product roles. They're testable.
Yeah.
Sales, well, they're sellers. So they're very good at selling you. And it's actually very hard to test for. Sure, you'll have some form of testing in place to weed out the amateurs, but you very quickly cross into a territory of, well, they're selling something, but can they sell my product? It is very hard to hire for. So whenever I see somebody, and this is not true, but it's what it feels like to me, like for every 10 people are hiring the seller bucket, one is good. Like I just have to churn through so many before I find the gems. And I had one in our last venture. Again, so much so that I want to spend my Saturday night checking in on how life is and so on and so forth. I had one in my prior venture, like just did so well. He stayed put with the acquirer for, I think, 7-8 years after. Did very well for them. Like he was very good. But again, if you force me, but it is you can only pick one, I think it's probably going to be on the maker side, just because at the very beginning, if you don't make anything people want, you're never going to get to the kind of sales part of the adventure. Even though you could also die there, but at least you got a few steps further. You might buy yourself a little bit of time. In the beginning, Michael and Dennis, we will be the sellers, right? As in, if you can't sell the first 10 customers yourself, nobody can.
Right. I remember one of the interviews you mentioned that you first need to figure out the delivery part, the product part, right? To make the people kind of, and then you can figure out the product market fit, right? Because without the first one, it doesn't make sense to kind of do anywhere. I agree with you, but what's interesting is maybe because you are like a product driven founder and then you kind of, more with the engineers, and for you kind of having engineers make sense, and then finding a good like salesperson or VP of sales, like, whoa, this is the gem, right? For my organization, because we're sales driven, we have a very strong sales team, a lot of very talented, bright people, head of sales, VP of sales, operation, very strong sales team. We have problem with like developing the engineering talent and making sure that they're product led, right? So that the engineers can actually think product, right? And then build product, not write code, right? And then having the engineers that can do that is, for me, is like an eye opening. Like, whoa, they can actually build a product without having product owner, like a founder, with them kind of on top of that. So, all right, makes sense. Now, I wanted to understand this. So multiple exits, multiple founders, a lot of different relationships that you build over the years. Any of those relationships grew into great friendships? A lot of the relationship, the partner type relationships that you had they go anywhere in terms of the friendship or communication? If they had, then did you continue building those, or you outgrow them and then you just moved apart? Or, what's your take on this?
I speak to all of my co-founders in all of my past ventures. As in, no ending was so dramatic or negative or skewed in one particular direction that a relationship was burnt and couldn't be utilized. Which makes me happy. As in, there's not a text I couldn't send right now and get a response to. It is also we speak to this day, like decades later, prior venture, which we sold for half cash, half stock. Then that stock took forever to go public. Went public, I think, 10, 11 years later, which was kind of like a hidden exit some summer. Oh, yeah, that stock. Of course, you have it it's in your little kind of spreadsheet. But nevertheless, kind of like, hey, and we kind of made up for kind of a founders reunion. Like, well, we just had another exit. Remember, we did this thing back in 2013, and payday arrived 2022 for the latter part. It is also a business relationship, and I think you should try to treat it as a business relationship when you work together, which is that we need to take some business decisions and not some friendship decisions. Doesn't mean that you should be an asshole or be kind of unfair. It just means that it is a business and we are partners in this business, and we should take those decisions as if we were kind of unknown entities to each other. doesn't mean that we can't speak or we can't meet up on a Saturday or can't have a drink, but it's a business relationship. I do think it's much easier to change the relationship towards something slightly different on the other side. Because now we don't have any other relationship than the stories that we crafted together in this particular venture. And they might be so good for where if I look at, say, Alex, we did visual revenue together as co-founders, did great, very rapid, came to an exit, did the integration, teamed up again as co-founders, did another kind of 6-7 years, now moved in separate directions. He co-founded his other kind of venture right now. It's fine. But I do think it's a business relationship while you're in the venture. And I think you can perhaps change it into something different after it. If you then team up, you should bring it back into a business relationship where you can speak to each other as business partners.
Does the relationship dynamic changes with project to project with regards to, hey, we started this one, we exited, we want something else. Do you have the same conversation? Like, hey, let's kind of discuss what the role is going to be. Maybe you wanted to step up and be a CEO this time because you kind of grew to this one, you have this kind of ambition. I understand that very often if you mentioned like word team up, right? So when you're teaming up, you kind of discuss the expectations, the resources, the motivation, the ambition that the both roles have, right? But walk me through that kind of how does that conversation usually happens with regards to moving to something new? And then another part of the question, do you think that by the default it's right to offer something like a new venture to your current partners first to say whether they're interested or discussing this with them or starting something on the side without them?
I think anything new will often kind of originate with one individual. Might even be the tiniest of flames, but somebody will have some inkling of an idea where you might bring in people who you like, trust, or smart and clever, to kind of brainstorm on it a little bit, but it really originates on some piece of paper, on somebody's kind of notepad. I've been very clear about what I want in my entrepreneurial career. I have the same role every time. I'm trying to become slightly better at that unique role. And I bring on people for where in this venture, at this moment, I think we increase the probability of success if you join. Not as in, we used to work together. We should just work together in the future because that was fun and exciting. Sure, it could be fun and exciting, but that seems like not the best of foundations to make a good business decision. Now, many times you can make this decision based on past relationships, on how well we work together. You know the exact kind of skill set. I know what I can multiply with versus a set of unknowns. That means you carry it in, not because of the relationship, but because of what you think it can bring to this new venture. So I don't think you owe any one of your past founders the initial kind of call. You owe it to the new entity of finding the best people that kind of increase the probability of success for this particular venture. And we should all be equally excited for each other once we get it started on new things, whether or not we work together.
Yeah. I think the last question on the kind of relationship partner type topics, you mentioned when we started the conversation that there are some things that you need to be cautious about, some recommendations we have into don't make these mistakes, when you started out the company with a partner, because top 5 reasons why a startup fails, you said like the wrong co-founders, right? So can we go quickly, just like as a checklist, 3, 4, 5 things you need to be paying attention to when starting up a business with someone?
In no particular order, and obviously not fully exhaustive.
Yeah,
I'll give you a few hints on my list at least. One, you should be crystal clear about the objective. What is it you want out of this venture? If one wants a forever business, and I'm not going to call it a lifestyle business, which I think is an unfair native connotation added to something which might just be a great business setup. But if somebody wants that and the other one wants max VC fuel growth, you are misaligned. Like, that would not happen. You would know each other good enough for that not to happen. But there's still some density here where you should try to describe or paint at least a set of possible futures. Which one of these possible futures, or which one of these particular avenues are you on, and which one am I on? And if we're not on the same, well, we should immediately align or immediately agree not to walk down two different avenues.
Right.
Because they look very similar in the beginning. It's only when you're much, much later, where you can't do any undo, that they start becoming more visible, that they're actually not the same journey. So that I would be very open about. What is it that you want out of this? Or the objective itself. You might want to build a public company. I might want to have a quick exit. After pre-A round, just build some, I think there's a little hack we can do here. 20 guys, good tech, somebody will fall in love with it. It's really a feature. I don't see the company. The feature is probably of value. And you're thinking 10 years into the future and building the team accordingly. Like, we're just not going in the same direction. Roles and responsibilities, especially with your co-founder. Sure, on day one, it's just so natural what we do, because we have to do everything all the time. But what roles and responsibilities do we expect each other to have in the future? At least paint a few pictures, which is that, I assumed you wouldn't be on the board. I assumed we would find a VP engineering and you would be CTO. For me, those are actually two different roles, or you think they're the same. Like, we should talk about that today. So at least have that talk through to the degree for where, we're aligned, we put it on paper, we had a kind of written dialogue on who we wanted each other to be.
Mm-hmm.
Once you kind of have that outlined, you can quickly figure out, we know where we're going to land. That I think is important. Then something that matters to me as well, which is a little bit harder to discuss. There's a few things you can do, but commitment. I'm doing a startup, and if you're applying for a job, we look different. Because a startup is not a job. It is a mission for where it'll be very different to that of coming in at 9 a.m. at some job, even doing good work in that setting. This is different. There's all sorts of kind of sacrifices that you will have to accept. And there's, things you would need to do here, you wouldn't need to do elsewhere. You can test for that a little bit. Here's a little tactic I'd like to do, myself included, by the way, which is that any co-founder, we've been between 2 and 4 in each one of my ventures. Whatever number of shares you have, we all buy those shares initially, meaning that you don't turn up here and just start to do good work, even though we say, we'll work for free the first kind of period until we get funding or whatever like kind of scheme in place. No, you need to go down to Citibank, look at your savings account, extract an amount that you're uncomfortable with, walk up to the office and put it into the business account. As in, you buy those shares. That I found to be one of the better qualifiers for whether you have real commitment. As in, this I want. As in, I want to take things, good things which I've done in the past, taxed money which I put into an account, extract and double down. It's not that you're supposed to be a professional investor. No, you're just supposed to be a committed co-founder. As in, a co-founder for where there should be almost no option to quit. The only way we quit is that we die. As in, it didn't work out. As in, this is a setting where you cannot quit. As in, that I'm not a fan of, and that is putting it politely. So that commitment, you should do a few things to test for that, because otherwise, some very kind of odd emotions will arrive if you think I'm not super committed to the next thing you and me are going to do together. Like, but Dennis, I just thought or I assumed, or my version of a startup in my mind was just so different to yours. Like, I should have asked, but of course, it's probably on me. So that, I think, will be the third bullet. I won't even go down that list.
Yeah. These are very great tips, especially about backing down, because just in my kind of universe of people I work with, my partners, you always know that we all are gonna die together if it's not gonna work. Till the end. It's it. It's like that it's either it's working or we're done. No one is quitting, right? Not you cannot say, hey, I'm kind of burned out or I quit or something.
Yeah.
It has to work, right? It just has to work. We're gonna be making sure that it's gonna work. I'm curious to also tap into your experience working with investors and boards and forming boards. Probably you raised multiple rounds. What's your take on kind of nurturing those relationships? Keeping tabs open, giving updates, etc. Like, what's your approach, kind of building boards and building relationships with kind of investors? What is the sort of like frequency of communication, and depending on the type of the relationship? But then the question is how to get maximum out of relationship with an investor and with the
It
board.
obviously depends very much on where in your journey you are. We can
Let's do early seed, maybe up to Series A. We're not going to talk more
yeah,
just those, kind of raising 50, 100. That's
yeah.
not for the audience, I think.
So early in your journey, there is really no need for a board. If you can get away with it, I wouldn't even establish one with your investors. There's some sort of fiduciary responsibility, perhaps even some insurance which you need to put in place for people who sit on your board for something that don't need to be a board discussion. This is not to say that you shouldn't talk to your investors. You should talk about some of the kind of themes which I think you should lean on them for, but the legal construct of a board, I think, is unnecessary. So early on, forget about how you could possibly set that up. Make sure, of course, if you took any money, you put in place some constructs that doesn't make it difficult for you to make a board in the future, as in who get what seats and how many number of independents, if any, and how many seats can the common shareholders kind of pick. Just make sure, well, the two founders get the 2 seats. We need 2 seats for investors. We'll leave 1 for somebody independent. Right now, we're not going to fill those seats. So it's just going to be us founders. Because really, as in, if you want oversight, you don't need really a board in a small startup to get oversight. So you can get that in many other ways. Now, on the investor side, I am a fan of doing many things. I'll give 2 examples. One, you should try to over-communicate. Don't write novels or novel-long like updates. Really short, succinct updates and send them often. Something for where I would never want them to be caught in some conversation, internal or external, where somebody says something about our now shared company and they don't already know. As in, they should be aware. Yes, Dennis is working on that V1. That's probably why he called around. Yeah, I am aware. Oh yeah, they just hired some new engineers. They hire them from here and there. Yeah, I know. They should just be in the know. If they're not in the know, it's because they didn't read those updates. Not on me. That's on you. But really, short, succinct updates going out often. Don't expect really. I'd rather some sort of long kind of back and forth. Just these are passive, few asks. If you have an ask, don't do generic asks. They are, in my opinion, just kind of worthless. Do specific asks. We're looking for new engineers. Let me know if you can help. Sure. What do you want? Tell me what you want me to do. I can tell you whether I can do that. If I can't, I'll just say, well, that's not within my purview. But it's specific, like prior venture. Lyra Hippo Ventures was one of our investors. He used to be the CEO of the Huffington Post. I know you know the guy who owns, at that time, the Washington Post. We did predictive analytics for media. Can you make an introduction to so-and-so next week and say this? Just, if you can't, that's okay. I'll ask another question. Let me know if you can do this one, very specific. Or I have a lead list of 14 in my pipeline where I would like you to kind of add a little bit of love. Can I come by your office? We go through the lead list and give you a quick update, 2-3 minutes on each. Let me know which one of these you might be able to kind of take on and help me kind of move to the next stage. Fair enough. Or I need some particular vetting for a new type of data scientist where we actually don't have the skill, but hey, 2 Sigma, you have, I think, 150 PhDs on staff. One of them must have done a thesis in this. Can you check? And if so, make the introduction, then she can do the validation for us. Like very specific ask where it's very quick to say, no, no can do, or yes, I will help you with that. That I liked, especially early on. Now, later things become kind of more long-term, more strategic, more setting the direction, pointing towards some sort of place where you want to go, which is a different story.
Interesting. So would you say that as an early stage founder, you can treat an investor as a certain like a magic pill or something that can kind of solve the problem or something, or like a bullet that you can just shotgun or something, but then you need to kind of use them as resource very specifically, like just exactly tell you what they need to do and how. And then, but the reason I asked this is we have a few kind of angel investments, and there's some early stage founders that we're kind of helping with, and sometimes I feel like they are not leveraging our resources enough. It's just kind of, they are not approaching us with some problems that can be solved, and either they are not communicating these problems or they don't have, which I doubt, right? So I was wondering, they're obviously going to be listening to this. Then, what advice would you give them with regards to working with investors, or utilizing the full power of what the external partner can give you, especially the strategic one? And then you mentioned like giving a short, regular updates very often that we are aware of what's going on in the startup. They're being very specific about the ask, especially with regards to the pipeline, as you said, or lead generation or sales, etc.
So the value of the update, again, is many things. One thing, you build trust over time, which is that at no point do they know any less than you do, and they're not caught off guard. And that trust you can leverage or positively take advantage of, which is that you say something and you do something. And if what you didn't provide the outcome you would hope for, you say so as well. There's the same set of updates. Now, what I like in those updates is that there might even be unknowns. An update is not all answers. There might be a set of unknowns in that update. And if you're not super intimate with your investors, where you might not yet exactly know where they can jump in, your updates become a small catalyst. But again, they're not kind of broad stroke updates. We're struggling with recruiting. Yeah, aren't we all? As in, tell me exactly what it is that you're struggling with in your update. As in, we have enough of a top of the funnel pipeline for our engineers, but it looks like we are kind of unable to move them past this particular step in our hiring funnel. And somehow we stumble, and I'm trying to kind of figure this out, and I'm working on it. And it might just be that you didn't really assume that any one of your, say, angel investors had any knowledge, but it could be that they actually spent years on that. They might even have owned some entity or been affiliated with some entity in this particular space and had some strong idea. This is how we solve it. And you might want to take advantage of this particular kind of process. Or if you want, I can come in, we kind of work this out on the whiteboard. I certainly have ideas, and I've succeeded past this kind of moment of friction. So I do like those unknowns to arrive as well, because that is something where you should have known, but you didn't. And now it is on them to kind of just step up and say, that I know. Down to kind of, well, this company I have a connection with. Or these type of candidates, we can certainly help you validate. Now, I do think it's on you, though, as an entrepreneur to have just enough walks or kind of lunches, whatever your kind of style is, with your investors to know who they are. As in, it's your job to kind of have a profile in your mind of, so he did this angel investor. This was his exit. This was the company. This is what he built. This is the knowledge that he has. And we talk, enough about it that I know when to use this particular bullet. Again, my hope is that you would have picked him for that even before he became an angel investor. And that's why he's here, because that particular bullet just increases my probability of success ever so slightly. It is not an afterthought, but even if you're here, go do all those walks or talks or Zooms with those investors, you'll figure out, so what bullets do I even have in my belt? You might sometimes have more bullets than you kind of imagined.
Are there any times that you felt like, okay, I'm too much, I'm asking too much, I'm pushing too much, I'm getting too much attention? When it is enough or not enough, and when it's too much? Is there a certain like a weekly, monthly type of engagement, or again, depending on a stage where you at, right?
There's some curve here. You're absolutely right. Where in any form of communication, not just to investors, you can go advertise or spank your leads. There's some sort of curve here for where you're now saying less by the amount of volume you are pushing in one particular direction. I think if you were on a kind of 3-4 week kind of cadence, you're doing very well. And nothing can really happen so dramatically over 3 weeks for where they should feel out of tune with your venture. So I wouldn't push it into weekly updates for where that's not their job. They don't work here. They just want to be in tune with what is happening. And if you have some sort of monthly updates, I think you are in good form. Obviously, assuming this is a quality kind of update. Now, where I have personally kind of less experience is that we've worked less with straight angels. We work mostly with traditional kind of institutional investors, where I have no guilt, as in you are an owner of this company. And if we somehow, through miracles, succeed and win, I will guarantee you, your tweet or wherever you sing your song will use words like we, as in you help make this a success. So if you want to use a future word like we, today's the day you earn it. So don't give me anything about you're busy. Like, you're a partner and you now own perhaps even a double-digit percentage of this company. So no guilt. And you shouldn't have any guilt. They might just finding it hard to swallow all your requests. Hey, don't have any guilt whatsoever. You'll just kind of figure out exactly how much you can extract from them. Yeah, sometimes a little bit easier if they have kind of they'll have kind of venture teams behind them, like all kind of recruiting and all sorts of services. Makes it a little bit easier, but don't have any guilt.
Gotcha. I don't know why I hope that I'm going to ask all this question and we still have time. I have a huge block of question about the teams you're hiring, your culture. Again, getting to your level and your success, I'm definitely can learn a lot from just understanding your approach there, but we don't have time. So I have a close-up question, all right? And then maybe we can do part 2 of this and talk more about the culture and the teams, all right? So the close-up question is this. I heard the tech is back. The investors are probably going to be back. We're going to hear some deals coming through. So we are on the rise. And I heard that the next 2 years will be one of the best in tech because investors are hungry. The evaluations were been low. Now they can be higher. There's a lot of different great techs coming up. What's your thoughts? Are we back? Are we on the rise? Are we not there yet? Is it a recession still? What are your sort of like thoughts, prediction on the? So we are recording this in what, like almost August 2023.
That's a good question. If you or me knew, we would make all sorts of even public-facing investments and benefit dramatically from those, but we don't know. But we do run our ventures. Now, if I were to comment, it does feel to me like people are still holding back ever so slightly. And the enthusiasm that you just described, I'm not sure I'm feeling it as intimately as you do. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope really that you're right, but it doesn't look like that or feel like that. Sure, pick any kind of particular metric that you care about. Inflation is certainly better today than it was yesterday. Right. And it looks like we're going in the right direction, but I'm not sure we've arrived yet and have done that kind of reset that we might need to do.
Interesting. We are not there yet with regards to sales, of course. So if you're talking about B2B sales and acquisitions and metrics, we are in a deep
Yeah.
right now, like everyone. Yeah, of course. But just one of my colleagues spoke to one of those kind of venture funds and private money hedge funds, those that in November last year were like shorting the stock and just kind of, closing deals and not investing. They told that things are looking back good, and that hopefully until the end of the year things can start picking up very quickly, and then deals can be closing. So I just wanted to reconfirm, obviously having access to your circles, if there's any conversations happening that, hey, things are looking good or not.
I would like to believe that the people I speak to are not attached to trends or trying to kind of time the market, but are just on a continuous basis investing in good entrepreneurs, in up markets, in down markets, in whatever market. And then over time, out of that comes a host of good companies. They seem to be less trying to time anything. Sure, they might want to make sure that by whatever strategy, the monies they put aside for follow-on or bridge rounds or what have you, we might need to kind of stretch that a little bit because we have things we do believe in that might take a little longer because there was kind of a hiccup in the universe and we should be able to kind of support that. Could be, but again, I am not hearing any kind of indication of, we need to kind of turn up the volume a little bit. And it starts on November 1st. And then after that comes the spring, we'll turn it up a little bit more. It's not what I'm hearing. But I do think at no point have we ever been at kind of we turned off the faucet. I think that's always on. And good people will be able to extract a few monies from here and there. Now, could you just go out willy-nilly with very little, like 2.5 years ago, and raise some capital on a half-assed idea, half-assed team, and no experience? That's still harder today. And I'm not seeing that moment coming back anytime soon.
Dennis, it's been an honor having you on. Thank you so much for your time. We should do part 2, and I'm very excited about it because there's some things that I really wanted to ask. So we're going to leave this to the audience. We're going to see people, engaging with the conversation, leaving comments, sharing, et cetera, and they like what they hear, then we might do the part 2. At least I would ask you for it. All right. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.